So, very good. Let me start with this. All right, excellent. Hello, everyone. I just got confirmation that you can see and hear us. So so for now we have our attendees muted just to not really muted, but just to manage. But obviously we have the chat room and we have Q&A. If you have any questions. So good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I know we have people from different time zones. Thank you all for joining our webinar today. Welcome to our Mentoring Roundtable in commemoration of the International Day of the Girl 2020. So it's obviously a very busy weekend. There's a lot going on, but and so we're really pleased to have people from different countries and a whole range of different levels, all the way from students to professionals and different genders as well. So so thank you all for being here. I know it's afternoon and it's evening in some places. So I am Dr. Lorraine Niba. I'm Global Director of Formulation and Knowledge Management at Ingredient Incorporated, and I'm founder and president of the Kuwa Women's Foundation. So I really especially want to thank all of our mentors, both the mentors and the mentees in our Kuwa Women's Foundation program, but also everyone who's a mentor, or a mentee in these programs. Varsha has a fantastic program. So anyone who's joining us today, who's a mentor or a mentee, I really want to say thank you. We want to appreciate you for all you're doing to develop and advance women. So the name of our foundation, Kuwa, actually comes from the Swahili word Kuwa Wezeshi. I guess you're wondering, what is Kuwa Wezeshi? So Kuwa Wezeshi actually means to enable or to empower, right? To enable or to empower. So if we look at the theme of this year's International Day of the Girl, it says, my vision, my voice, my vision, my mission. So this is very much in line with when you think about the concept of mentoring and you think about what we're trying to do as a women's organization. Mentoring is certainly a very critical tool in being able to give girls and women a voice to enable them to fulfill their mission, right? So this is one of the reasons why we really wanted to spend some time and talk about mentoring today. We have an incredible panel today, and they're all mentors, advocates, and champions for women. And we're going to share their stories, and they're going to share their insights and their expertise. But I did want to start by really defining, when we talk about mentorship and mentors, what exactly does that mean? So a mentor is defined in the dictionary as a trusted counselor or a guide, right? So very heavy when you think about it, a trusted counselor or a guide. Now, mentoring is described as the action of providing guidance, of giving influence or direction to somebody. So again, being a mentor and mentoring is quite a bit of responsibility. And so that's one of the reasons why today we're going to have discussions about why is it important to have a mentor, and how do you even go about finding a mentor? And again, like I said, our esteemed panelists all have different experiences in this area, and they're going to share that with us today. So let's go ahead and meet our panelists. And again, I just want to reiterate, as I said at the beginning, we're going to have discussion on some questions, but we also want to hear from you. We want to hear from our attendees and our participants. We have a chat function, we have a Q&A. So if you look, if you're using a computer or your phone, there is the opportunity to either send us a chat or send us a question. And we really, or even your comments, right? If you're a mentor and you have experience in mentoring, and you want to, or a mentee and you want to share some of those, we really want this to be a conversation and for it to be a round table. Okay, so starting with Ms. Varsha Waishampayan, our first panelist. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to introduce Varsha today. So Varsha is actually the founder and CEO of WINGSForGrowth, which is a phenomenal program which she founded after almost 3 decades on Wall Street to develop and advance women. And I have to share that it truly was such a tremendous growth opportunity for me to be a mentor in Varsha's program last year and to work an 8-month journey with a phenomenal mentee who also helped me grow. So Varsha, could you tell us a little bit more about your incredible journey and sort of how you made this transition to create WINGSForGrowth?
Sure, and thank you for those kind words, Lorraine. I really appreciate that. That touches my heart. Thank you. So a little bit about myself. When I started my professional life, I was actually a professor of chemistry at a university. I was a teacher. And then I came here to United States. I was back in India. So I am from India, and it's almost 30 plus years ago when I came to this country. I felt that being a teacher is not going to be that impactful for me. So I decided, don't ask me why, I decided I'm going to pursue careers on Wall Street. So I spent thereon, as Lorraine said, I spent 3 decades on Wall Street. But one thing that never really left me was being a teacher. I was a teacher when I was in a professional industry. Both my parents were professors of economics. So teaching was in me. And what I felt during my journey on Wall Street, that it's very difficult for women to rise the ladder, corporate ladder, very lonely on the top, especially for financial services, and more especially because I was a woman of color and an immigrant. So this was never easy. So what stayed with me, because my father reminded me that I'm a teacher and I should go back and give back what I have learned. And I used to laugh and say to him, when I retire, I'll be a teacher again. And he would say, these are his quotes, he would say, there's never a bad time to do something good. It's a matter of priorities. And that just triggered something in me. And my father had a huge influence on me. I looked up to him in every way. And I said, oh my God, I don't want to regret that I didn't do this because my father thought I should do it. And that was the moment I had my job at PwC. I thought about a couple of days. I resigned from my job at PwC because I knew that what I'm trying to do now is not something we can do on the 11th or 12th hour in a day. It's a full-time job. And I wanted to do this the right way. So I quit my job. And since then, in 2016, we founded WINGSForGrowth. And we'll talk a lot about mentoring and women leadership. So Lorraine, I'll continue to sprinkle my experience in the last 4 years at Wings as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Varsha. I mean, what a compelling story, right? I've always been touched by, the impact that your father had on you, right? And sort of how that really shaped what you do today and how it informs the passion that comes across, when you talk about mentoring. So thank you so much. And again, to our attendees and participants, as you can see, we have experts, right? Like I said, real advocates and champions for women. So transitioning to our next panelist, Dr. Nagella Nukuna, whose father also happens to be a teacher. And she's actually a technical manager and analytical leader at DuPont. And they have a fantastic mentoring program at DuPont. So Nagella, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Lorraine, and thank you, Varsha. Your story just, settles well with, I would say, most of us here on this panel, and your bravery to get off from a professional job to really follow your vision is one that we should all try to emulate. And thank you so much for that compelling story. And always, you know how I think about you. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. So as Lorraine said, I am a chemist as well. So many chemists on this panel here. So I studied chemistry at Case Western Reserve University and did a postdoc more in studying, biological systems. So chemistry is all over, right? So, and then joined AstraZeneca, the well-known AstraZeneca nowadays for the vaccine. But they moved away from psychiatry because that's where I was focusing on as an analytical chemist, and then moved to DuPont 10 years ago. And so as Lorraine said, mentoring in DuPont, we actually call it MIND. So mentoring in DuPont, it's really taken a huge wave in women's development, because as you know, DuPont is a chemical company, traditionally known for men. So they're really trying to encourage women to grow within DuPont. So I've been part of the mentoring in DuPont, and it has really, really enhanced who I have become, and also just helped me to fit in and belong to the small number of women that are still growing within the STEM field. So just to throw this in, whenever I think of my development as a professional, currently a mother as well as a leader, there are a few pivotal lessons, and it's really come from this concept of Isaac Newton, which is when you stand on the shoulders of giants, you try to reach for the stars, right? So it's not verbatim, that's my own way of interpreting it. So I stood on giants, and those giants were my mom, my aunts, my mother-in-law. They actually raised me to reach for the sky. And to me, those are really my fundamental mentors. And I have grown in that path to be able to share that with others. So I hope as we go on during this session, we can talk a little bit more about those pivotal moments in our lives where our own mothers have actually done it for us. But thank you so much. Looking forward to this discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nagella. I love the personal element of women. And I have to say your grandmother as well, right? I know your grandmother also. Yeah, your
grandmother who was not educated at all,
yeah.
but gave us that emotional intellect. So
absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to our next panelist, and that is Mrs. Namondo Lima, who is an anesthetist, physician assistant, and also a former engineer, and just very similar to the DuPont program, where she is, she actually has a lot of girls and students who shadow her, right? Nagella, I love the quote about when you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Because then when you see and you have the personal experience, it helps other girls to dream as well. So, so Mrs. Lima, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Lorraine. I feel so blessed to be in the presence of so many accomplished women. I feel special that I can be counted amongst them. As Dr. Lorraine said, my name is Namondo Lima. A lot of people call me Auntie Nams or Manams or Sister Nams, because I met a lot of them in Lourdes and I was ahead of them. I'm a physician assistant in anesthesiology, and in America, we call that an anesthetist. It's a program, it's a master's level science program. It's always done at a medical school, 27 months. And I did this after working as an engineer for 8 years. My last job was with IBM. My bachelor's degree was electrical engineering. My master's degree was biomedical engineering. And so for IBM, I was the lead on a help desk for a hospital computer system. And the hospital was in St. Louis, Missouri. Interesting how I got that job actually was through a mentor in that company. She was the lead where the hospital was actually located in St. Louis, Missouri. And so we went there for training. Somebody else was the lead at my IBM location here in Atlanta. And after we went there for training, this lady actually influenced that hospital to let IBM know that the condition under which they would keep that contract was to make me the lead.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So that was one of my first instances in mentoring, as a young professional. And I was really awed, I was like, wow, they're going to keep this account because of little old me. And when we got back to Atlanta, I remember my boss telling me here, that the people in St. Louis thought that I walked on water. And I thought, okay, I think they just got, I think they just went overboard there, but that's all right. I was very grateful for that. So I did that for a total of 8 years. Then in 2002, IBM went through a very serious, economical crisis. So they had to fire a lot of people. Now they gave some of us the ability to switch to another department, and I chose the severance pay. I chose to take the severance and to go back into education, to go back and look for something else to do. And while I was searching for what to do, my husband actually knew a Chinese engineer that he worked with whose wife had done my program. And so he brought it up to me and I looked it up, and that's how I switched. And I've been doing that for 15 years now. I graduated in 2005. I love what I do. I love the students that come through that have to mentor under me. It's actually a program that is almost enforced. That's part of their degree process. That's part of what they have to do to get their degree. I am married to my husband 25 years now. I have a 20-year-old daughter. She's a junior in college, and that's my story.
I just love the personal, sort of the personal experiences, right? Because again, that informs like this whole passionate approach from your personal experience, right? And I love the fact that you talked about a mentor that really advocated in a very practical way for you. And I think it ties into this whole concept of mentoring to almost sponsorship, almost having someone who's a sponsor. And so hopefully we'll explore that a little bit later. I am one of the people who calls you Sister Nams. So since you've given us permission to do that, I'm going to do it on this call. So I want to welcome, we had some more people join us, some really fantastic people. So welcome Maureen, welcome Bernadette, welcome quite a few more people. Truly a pleasure to have you on here. We have a really great question from Maureen for Varsha that we're gonna talk about in a little bit. But before we do that, I do want to close out the introductions with our final panelist, Dr. B. Ndikum, who is, she's actually currently very crossover, right? So she's a senior instructor of pharmacy at the Skaggs School of Pharmacy. And she's also a clinical pharmacist at Kaiser Permanente. So a lot of really practical hands-on, both teaching, right? We kicked off with Varsha, the teacher. and so our final panelist is Dr. B. So could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the fantastic work you're doing?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lorraine. Thank you to all the panelists. I feel very special to be amongst these women of substance, definitely. And listening to your stories, oh my God, I really want to be like you all when I grow up. I tell you, I'm still growing. So my story started out, I did my undergraduate degree, not in chemistry, but in microbiology from the University of Boya. So when I moved to the US, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with a microbiology degree. So I did have some great mentors along the path who encouraged me to pursue pharmacy, which was awesome. It wasn't an easy journey, just like you, Sister Nams, where you had people encouraging you. I met a lot of roadblocks along the way. People that I looked up to as mentors actually disappointed me. And I'll share a little bit about that story later. But I was opportune to pursue a degree in pharmacy. And when I graduated back in 2003, I was ready to hit the road, start working, take care of my family. But an opportunity came along, right? 3 weeks before graduation. I was asked to apply for a fellowship to do teaching and learning, an opportunity that I did not apply for, an opportunity that just showed up knocking, right? So I'm like, teaching, I've never thought about being a teacher. But when I looked back, I come from a household where my mom and dad were both teachers, so I could not escape it. So I grabbed that opportunity, did a 2-year fellowship at the University of Colorado. And after my fellowship, they signed me up to be a senior instructor. And the thing that I love most about my job is I'm able to spend some time in the classroom with my students. And I'm also able to bring my clinical experience out in the pharmacy world into the classroom. So I love the variety. I get to meet a lot of people. I get to meet a lot of mentees in the community. We do a lot of community work, health fairs. Oh my goodness, I cannot tell you the connections that you get when you go out there in the community and meet people. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of those experiences.
That's fantastic, Dr. B. You know, and to your point about, you know, the connectivity and sort of meeting people, because that's how you influence people, right? You know, the underlying thread is obviously being a teacher, which means you're always teaching, but just imagine the impact when people kind of see you in person, right? So again, it ties into the common message we've all had, which is really about that personal connection, that personal element, you know, and sort of how you impact people. So fantastic, right? As all the participants can tell, we have a really, you know, highly accomplished, like I said, esteemed panel, right? You know, that's the word I use, and it's exactly what they are. So we're going to have a discussion, but I did want to jump into a really great question that, you know, Maureen had for Varsha, which was, you know, Varsha, if you could maybe just talk a little bit more about what was the specific always happens, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right, Stanams. So Varsha, if you could just talk about the specific tipping point that led to you leaving Wall Street, which I'm sure your personal experience, you've shared some of your personal experiences, but even myself being in the corporate world tends to be very male dominated. And to be very, it's a certain kind of environment, but what was the tipping point for you? And I wanted to pick up this question because one of the questions I get asked the most by mentees is, I feel like I want to do more, or I feel like my mission, I want to fulfill my mission and I don't know how. So Varsha, I think you're like the exemplification of being able to be bold and courageous. And so maybe, you know, just talk a little bit more to Maureen's question.
Sure. You know, first of all, I absolutely, Dr. B, I think you said, I'm still growing. It is such an important thing to internalize. That point is very important. Coming back to what really made me jump and make that difficult, I will say it was a very difficult decision. I walked in with my resignation into my boss's office, and within 10 minutes, he convinced that I'm being emotional and I shouldn't do this. And I came back. So I don't want to paint any rosy pictures here. This was not easy, right? I came back and I said, okay, what am I doing? I'm going to be a partner next year or in 2 years. I shouldn't be doing this. And then next day morning, I woke up and I decided this is it. And I'll talk about what that was, that I have to do this. And instead of talking to my boss or going with the resignation second time, I basically wrote an email and blasted it out to all my leadership team. That here is my resignation, 2 weeks notice, happy to stay longer if anybody needed it. No changing minds anymore, we're done. So I'll tell you, those kind of things happen when you have a major inner power. It really has to come from inside. And when that happens, nothing can stop you. Nothing can stop you. So my advice is always for everyone that be true to yourself. Right? You have to. And because that's the strongest you. There is no other way. That's the strongest you, right? So to me, there were 3 reasons. Other than I always tried to be true to myself. That was definitely a power. But there are 3 things that happened. One is I felt that I had a huge impact as a mentor and a teacher on my teams. And every time I saw that woman who was very smart, feeling stuck in the middle. So you grow through a few years because you're a student, everybody's focusing on you, you get few years out of that. Then you reach after 8 or 5 or 6, 7 years, whatever that right time frame, women start to feel stuck. Why? Because there's so much demand on their time, right? The family, professional life, and then we get stuck, right? So I felt that when I talked to these women, then why are you stuck and what helped me? I come from a very traditional Indian background where women didn't work as much on those years, right? So I was able to get myself unstuck so I can help someone to get unstuck. So that was number 1. Number 2, and I'm going to be, one thing I promised to myself that when I speak, I'm going to speak very candidly. So here is my candid version. I was disgusted that every time I was passed for a promotion. So if I keep waiting because the promotion is going to happen next year, it may never happen next year, right? So what am I waiting for? I can't control something that I can't control. And the third thing, which was exactly is the power, talk about it, my father, right? He was not doing well health-wise. And I did not want him to die and me to feel that, oh my God, he always asked me to do this and I never did. And just FYI, a couple of years ago, my father did pass away, right? So this was a guiding light from above, was kind of telling me that this is your journey, you should do this, right? And you see these signs when you're so sure of yourself, right? So there's no dreamy story. This is the real story, that you feel strong about yourself, and then all these decisions can open up, and you can open up to them. So I hope, I don't know who asked this question. I hope the question really helps you. I mean, my response really helps you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Maureen says, thank you for your candid response. So very insightful. And I happen to know her, and she's actually a banking executive. So trust me, your answer, your answer helps her a lot. And I love this, Varsha. You always talk about authenticity, right? So to your point about being true to yourself and sort of having this inner power and sticking to your convictions. So a lot in there, a lot of really great messages that I love, right? And the fact that you just took action, because that's the other thing, right? I love the fact that, you were called emotional. Hey, I think every woman has heard that, right? You were called emotional and you said, you know what, I'm going to do this, right? I'm not going to waffle back and forth. I'm going to take a decision that is irreversible, because when you blast out your resignation letter, then it's done, right? There's no going back. There's no going back. So I love that. I think there was also something that you said that is really key that I want us to talk about a little bit about women getting stuck, right? And you helping to get people unstuck, because the data actually shows that a lot of women, the ceiling for a lot of women is manager, between manager to director level, and every organization has different hierarchies. But women rise to the level of manager, and then from manager to director, it's very, it drops precipitously, and then from director to vice president, right? So there really is this idea of women being stuck. There is data, and it's actually very, very true, So, so to build on that, maybe we can just talk a little bit more about what mentoring means, personally, right? And obviously, I read out the dictionary, definition. But again, as we know, the personal experience, like Varsha said, is really helping women on getting unstuck, both from her personal experience. So maybe Dr. B, we'll just come back to you. And maybe you can just share a little bit, when we say mentoring, on a personal level, what does that mean, and what comes to mind for you?
So thank you, Dr. Lorraine. When I think of mentoring, I think of somebody that you look up to, somebody that inspires you, somebody that you want to be, right? I just want to share a little story to all the young girls, all the potential mentees that are attending this session. I used to be that young girl, showed up in America trying to pursue my American dream, right? Enrolled in a community college. I'm coming in with some background in microbiology. Enrolled in a community college, and I started taking classes, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had 2 counselors, and I'm gonna be candid. Thanks, Varsha, for opening that up. One of them was an African-American lady. The other was a white lady. So being this young African girl in a community where you're still trying to get a claim to the culture, I was looking up to that African-American counselor to help me pursue my dreams. I approached her. I told her I wanted to go to pharmacy school. And the response I got from her was, why do you want to go to pharmacy school? Why don't you do a pharmacy technician program at the community college? So this lady saw me, a young African girl. She didn't think I was good enough to pursue a pharmacy career. And this was a counselor, somebody you look up to as a mentor, right? I was devastated. I couldn't believe what I heard. It almost broke me down, but I didn't let it. I moved on to the next counselor, who was a white lady. I told her I wanted to go to pharmacy school. And she was all excited. She was like, oh my God, that's great. Let me know what you need. If you need a letter of recommendation, I'll write it for you. So I was inspired, right? I looked up to her. I knew she was gonna help me through pursuing my goal. Back then, there wasn't electronic applications. So I had to handwrite my application. I didn't know I needed to apply to multiple schools. All I knew was Minnesota. So I applied to the University of Minnesota after completing my prerequisites. And I handed her one of my letters of recommendation. And she promised she was gonna, say good things about me. So I was very confident. Deadline for application was on a Friday. Saturday morning, I received a letter from the university. My application was incomplete. Guess what was missing? My letter of recommendation.
Oh, wow.
So I cried and I cried. And the next week I showed up to the school. I went to her office and I said, hey, Kimberly, what happened to my letter? Oh, Hilda, sorry, I was so busy. I lost your letter. I didn't have an opportunity, the regular excuses. And the one thing I asked her was, do you realize this is a year of my career? You just messed up. And her response to me was it a guarantee you were gonna get in?
Wow.
So again, right? We look up to these people. We look up to them as mentors and they disappoint us, but we don't let it stop there. I went back, transferred my credits to the University of Minnesota, continued with my microbiology degree program. And the following year, I made sure I applied to 10 other schools. I made sure I looked for more mentors to write me letters. I made sure I followed up with them. So I always like to share the story, not to discourage young people. I like to share these stories to tell you, do not take no for an answer.
Correct.
You're gonna come across people who try to bring you down, who will think you're not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. Why do you wanna go to pharmacy school? Why don't you just do a pharmacy technician program? That's how she saw me. That's the level she put me at. But I did not take no for an answer. I kept searching. I kept searching for somebody that's gonna tell me, yes, you can do it. To me, that's what mentorship is. Thank you.
Wow. 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 I mean, the importance of finding the right people. And I love what you said about do not take no for an answer. I love the fact that, after a difficult experience, you didn't give up, right? You actually went back and did it 10 times more. You applied to more schools, found more people. Just so many key lessons. And I want to add that, Dr. Bernadette Timungwa sent in the chat room that she's very proud of you. She knows your journey. And so despite the challenges you had, we're all proud of you.
Azzy was actually with me here in Colorado. We went through this together.
So she was a first-hand witness, right? And I love the fact that, you talked both about the fact that it was actually the challenges that shaped your idea of mentoring, right? Just as I think Sister Nams also talked about the fact that it was actually a positive experience that shaped her idea of mentoring. So maybe we'll just go back to Sister Nams for a minute. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more, Sister Nams, about what mentoring means to you personally, right? Maybe just build on the positive experience. And also if there's any challenges, right? I think as Hilda outlined it, it's not a bed of roses. Sometimes you have very terrible, imagine an adult letting you down with something as simple as a recommendation letter, right? Sometimes it's heart-wrenching experiences, but Sister Nams, could you tell us a little bit more just on a personal level outside of a textbook, what mentoring really means to you and being a mentor?
So What mentoring means to me is actually taking somebody under your wing, showing them things that you missed on your path. Because I think this actually shortens the it shortens the struggle for them. And I'll just give you one little story. When I was a student in anesthesia, I was doing my PEDS rotation, my pediatrician rotation. So I had to get to the hospital really early because it's a whole lot of setup, you know, because for the kids, everything is really, you have to be very, very careful. You can't have fluid in the, I mean, you can't have air in the fluid in the bag because their circulation is so tiny and very delicate. And every time I would any air in his bags, I just saw him, he'll just turn it on and he'll just drip it and there'll be no air in it. And I'll come and I'll just open mine and I'll be there hitting it, struggling to take the air out, struggling to take, and so, I mean, it just, I'm coming like 30 minutes early, just worrying about getting air out of this IV bag. And then I finished my PEDS rotation, went to my cardiac rotation, and I had a, and so I saw him come one morning. I was there struggling with the air. He told me, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, it's cardiac, so you know we have to be careful about air in the IV bag. You can't have air in the circulation." He goes, "No, that's not how you do it." So he paused and he showed me the trick. He showed me the trick that up to that point I had struggled with. And I just wondered, how come that previous mentor didn't pause or even pay me enough attention to show me, like, don't take this long just setting up IV bags? So that's what I do for my students. When they come under me, I show them all the tricks because I say, you're going to go out there, you're going to go to your rotation. Sometimes you get hazed at the rotation, you get laughed at. You know, it's not everybody who shadows a student who really wants the student to succeed. Some of them actually take pleasure in seeing you suffer a little bit. Yeah. So I try to tell them all the little tricks. That way when they go and they're hazed, they are ready for it. And it gives me so much pleasure when they write me back, when they send me texts or they send me a thank you card and letting me know what a difference, you know, that I gave to them, what a difference it made. Yeah. So that's, I mean, that's what mentoring means to me. It means taking the burden of anxiety, the burden of, you know, just being in a new environment, taking that burden away from the student. Yeah. And just giving them little tricks, little, you know, notes that they can hang on to help them in their career. Yeah, that's what mentoring means to me.
I love that, Sister Nams. I love the fact that you said you show them all the tricks, right? Because that's why I said mentoring just beyond the textbook definition, because it's actually the practical everyday. How are you impacting and how are you making somebody feel when they walk away, right? So we're gonna have, you know, I'm gonna have Varsha also talk a little bit about you know, this whole idea of mentoring and the challenges, but I did want to just make a note, you know, for Hilda from Lambert. So Lambert, it's wonderful to have you on here, but Lambert had a really great point where, you know, he said, you know, a lot of times guidance counselors are really not mentors, right? You know, where you shared the story you shared, I think we've heard those stories a lot of, I never had that personal experience where someone didn't believe in me at all, but I know there's a lot of people who've had that, you know. So I think Lambert has a really great point. I agree with you that, you know, really when we think about mentors, you know, really choosing who is a mentor. And a lot of times a guidance counselor is just that, right? Sometimes you find, you know, I think I've shared the story about the director of our MBA program when I was in business school, who became a great mentor in terms of the advice she gave me. But again, sometimes that's really not their job, right? So sometimes it works out that someone is a great mentor and sometimes they're not. So, so really great point, Lambert, you know, around how we choose mentors. We're going to talk about that. That's one of the topics we want to talk about later in terms of, you know, being really careful how you choose a mentor and how you find a mentor. And I guess for me, the takeaway from, you know, again, Hilda had some really great key points, but one of the takeaways again is don't give up. If you're disappointed in somebody, in a mentor, you know, you go out and you find others, right? You find others and make sure that you stay the course. So thank you, really, really great, a lot of great inputs from the audience. So Varsha, I was going to ask you a little bit about also this whole idea of what mentoring means and some of the challenges, but I also wanted to read some feedback from Lillian, who's actually in the Wings. I believe Lillian is in the Wings program. So Lillian says, yeah, Lillian says, special thanks, Varsha. And she's actually thanking you for introducing her to me, which is good, right? So, you know, she says that, you know, she's experiencing not just a mentor, but a chain of mentors and women who have stepped where she wants to step. So I love that, Lillian, right? Not just a mentor, but a chain of mentors and women who have stepped where you want to step. Again, it goes back to what Nagella said earlier about standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And then it gives you more vision for you to fulfill your own mission, right? As well as it is for the International Day of the Girl. So Varsha, maybe just talk to us a little bit more about, you know, again, you know, just the challenges and dealing with the challenges of finding the right mentors.
So so first I want to really talk about what is mentoring, right? It's really, and I know that Lorraine, you talked about the dictionary definition.
Right, yeah.
But I'll tell you, I'll share you some, and I hope I'm not going to go over my time. So if I am, let me know, time's up, stop, right?
Don't worry about the time, don't worry.
So I'll start by saying, you know, when I was thinking of doing this and I resigned my job and now what, you know, I told my son who was now an adult, right? So I said, I'm going to do this. And he goes, really? Why? And I said, well, you know, this is so important. And then I explained everything to him that I really want women to rise to the leadership role. And more importantly, it's not about leadership role. Wings' mission is to really have women show up as a leader wherever they go, family, community, wherever they are. Just show up as a leader. I'm here, I will take charge and I'll get things done, right? That's the mindset and the behavior. It's not about rising to the C-level executive positions. That's important too. But if we can show up as a leader everywhere, so he said, well, then don't call it mentoring. And I said, why not? And he says, mentoring means somebody's like really in trouble. Those are the people who go for mentoring, right? And I'm like, what? You know, but think about this. And that time he was young, right? And he's like in schools, they have counselors and mentors that I'm struggling. You better go get a mentor, right? I'm struggling. So first of all, we got to stop that. And for that, if there was another equivalent word for mentoring, I would replace mentoring from Wings and I'll call it that, right? So I'm still searching for that. So now let's talk about what does it really mean? I want to say that mentoring is a two-way relationship. You're not just learning from your mentor. Your mentor must learn from you. Otherwise, this is not an impactful relationship, right? And, you know, I think Dr. Hilda, she said that I'm still growing, right? We're mentors. The minute you start to talk to somebody who's your mentor who thinks that I'm here just to give you advice, get rid of those mentors. You don't need them, okay? They are not the right mentors. They are learning from you. And one thing that, you know, and Lillian can talk about this and Lorraine can talk about it. We have like a panel of mentors, right? At Wings, I did not think that person or a woman can rise to the leadership or create this mindset with just one person's help. It's a very high touch and very highly structured program. If you're just going to one person, getting their advice over a cup of coffee or these days on Zoom, that's not mentoring, right? You need to have a structured program, whether you create it for yourself or you come to the nonprofit programs like WINGSForGrowth or some other program at your work, doesn't matter, right? You do need a structure where you can measure your success, but also measure your mentor's success, right? So Dr. B, if this was a program where you were measuring your mentor's success and the program was showing your mentor, you better do more work, right? So it's okay. So I mean, look, this is not a paying it forward in my mind. A lot of people think, oh, I want to pay it forward, so I'll become a mentor. No, this is a responsibility. It's a commitment. Don't just do this as okay, I'm doing a favor to someone, right? So I can talk for hours, Lorraine, so stop me right here. I'll just stop.
No, but you know, it's interesting, Varsha, because first of all, a lot of really key things there, but they all tie in, right? Remember in my opening remarks, I mentioned the fact that a mentor is a guide or a counselor. It's not a light thing, right? You know, so absolutely, to your point, it has to be structured, right? Like I think when I shared my experience, you know, as a mentor in Wings, for me, it was equally transformational to me, right? It has to transform both the mentor and the mentee. It's a shared journey. And I know you have very, very specific accountability, but for me, even as a human being, as a person, you know, so I completely agree, you know, some really great points there. I love the fact that you highlighted that a lot of times when people hear mentoring or they need a mentor, they think it's somebody who's damaged, right? People think, oh, well, you need help, right? Therefore, it's development. But it's not, you know, it's not. It's about, again, this philosophy of women showing up as leaders. We know women are always very hesitant about stepping up as leaders, right? We worry about, we get stuff done, but do we want to take a leadership role? Not necessarily, right? That's why in Kuwa, I'm very, very emphatic about, this is also about leadership. So I love that. And so I'm actually going to transition to Dr. Nagella to tie in a little bit of this idea of it being a two-way exchange, right? Because we've actually talked about it, you know, as you looked at the MIND program from DuPont. We also, you know, really looking at collaboration and a trusting and empathetic, right? It has to be a relationship where there is trust and it's two-way. So maybe Dr. Nagella, tell us a little bit about, you know, what mentoring means to you. This whole idea of it being a two-way, like Varsha said, where there's accountability and it's not about, you know, sympathy or just helping somebody or charity, but also why it's important to have mentoring, right? Because it ties into, you know, the points that both Varsha and Dr. B brought up earlier, which is, you know, is it something that you can just do on your own, or do you actually need people? So a very long question, Dr. Nagella, but I know you can address all of it.
So yeah, and I really, really have enjoyed all the stories so far, and Varsha and Sister Nams and Dr. Hilda, you guys have touched on I kept wiping my tears, like, gosh, they're speaking for me, you know, they're saying exactly what we have all experienced in the workplace. And I would tie in a story to that as well. But let me start off by saying, you know, when I think of mentoring, you know, Varsha just mentioned, it's really a symbiotic relationship. You know, I go into mentorship if I'm mentoring someone, and I have had great luck in DuPont to be able to do it across the ocean, especially with the virtual scenario now. I'm talking to people in Hong Kong and we're trying to do it the best way we can. So it has really made me reflect on my own circumstance, and it has really made me grow. So mentorship for me it's been more symbiotic than anything, right? It has improved my job satisfaction as the mentor. It has made me think of what I can improve so I can do more for my mentee. And we end up having discussions in our mentorship sessions where it's give and take most of the time. And I tend to, you know, obviously we're structured, we make sure that we follow through with all the tasks that we need to do, we're accountable, and we don't dilute anything. But on the other hand, we make sure that I am very open and transparent with my failures, because it is through my failures that my mentee also learns, as Manam said, not to make those same mistakes that we made, you know, those tricks that we always have to give. Again, I will go back again to what my mom, and I think more importantly, my grandmother used to tell us. She was one of those people who always affirmed. She always made you think you were the queen of the room. So every time you did anything, she made you think you were so good at it. And that concept of affirmation for me is one of the most important things to do to a mentee. Not trying to change who they are, just guiding them, advising them, and making them become their own, just better. And so the story I was going to talk about was, mentors, when I look for mentors, or when I pick mentors, or if I'm challenged with being a mentor, I always start with this one story. Especially being a woman and being a mother, I have learned that you really have to be a leader. You really don't have a choice. You have to lead, because those young ones always look up to you, right? Just like I looked up to my mother. So the one thing I always say is the men in my life, the men at the workplace, I try to make them good partners, but I also will not put them as my first mentors. They are great partners, and I align with them for that partnership, for us to move forward as women. And I say this because I've had some experiences. So in my last job, when I was a postdoc at Cleveland Clinic, I actually got a very good opportunity to start a startup, to lead a startup company in clinical diagnostics for cardiovascular events. And I was pregnant. I was 6 months pregnant with my son. And I was ready to, I was ready to just do it. I thought the postdoc was enough and I was going to start. So I signed with my boss at that time. I signed to actually lead this diagnostic company. And, but I wasn't very pleased to do it. It was just one of those things that it was an opportunity, and I said, let me just take it. And because I knew who he was a very, very, I think the word is aggressive, but I want to make it softer. But he was very aggressive and also very enthusiastic about me leading and making it work for him. So it wasn't about me. So I got this, luckily I went for PitCon, which is a chemical conference, and I just applied for a job in AstraZeneca. And the day after I had signed to lead this diagnostic company, the AstraZeneca job came through. And I went over to his office. And this is very similar to Varsha's story. And I went over to his office and he told me, he said, AstraZeneca is not worth your time. They have all these statins that are being questioned now in the marketplace. And so that was fine. I was okay with that, because it was very much in the news that it was causing liver problems. But what he said that made me run out of his office in happiness that I was making the right decision will throw you off your legs, because he said, and you are pregnant, nobody will want you. So I said some choice words, walked out of his office, locked the door, and I went off. And that's how I made that decision. So it has really guided me to look for female mentors and to be a strong female advocate. And I still, as I said, I'm not bashing men here, but I would align with them as partners, because I think we as women need to affirm other women and not put them down. So in a sense, that's what mentorship means to me. It's really about making people feel good about themselves, because gosh, being pregnant is not a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, you know what, Nagella, there's so many versions of that story, right? I mean, of course, I can only imagine, I think Varsha had talked about the women getting stuck. That's one of the reasons, right? I mean, people, even just the idea that you may get pregnant, sometimes they don't want to consider you for a promotion, right? I know when we do succession planning, people think about that. So I love this. First of all, I want to say the piece about affirmation, right? The example from your grandma. It's so great, because I always say people know what they're doing wrong. A lot of times when people walk in to talk to you, they already know what's wrong with them. They don't need you echoing it, right? What people need to hear is what they're doing right. That's what I've always felt, So I love this idea of affirmation, of really, especially for women, pulling out the good, right? And you can point out what they're doing wrong in a productive way. But I think, our default is always to reiterate to people the 5 things they're doing wrong and forget to highlight what they're doing well. So I love this idea of affirmation. The idea of men as allies, we talk about this all the time. I know Varsha has a program now, you know, my company at Ingredient, they're looking at men as allies. And, you know, I agree with you because first of all, women have to be in visible spaces, right? Women have to see other women who are successful, right? Women see men who are successful all the time. So we really have to think about models. I've always had male mentors, you know, I've shared that. I do have some female mentors, but the overwhelming majority have been male mentors for me. And I've been fortunate that they're very fair and very open and you know, all the way from my dad and whatever. But we also have to be aware that, you know, there's men who are, you know, there's sort of men who have a different experience. And I know Maureen has a question about that, you know, where she's asking about, you know, you, Nagella, about DuPont and a male-dominated environment that we'll get to in a little bit. But I did want to share a couple of comments as well. And we have a question from Azi as well for, you know, for Sister Nam. So we have a comment from, you know, my goddaughter, Lorraine, where she says that she's really seeing mentoring in a different way. You know, so Lorraine is a young college graduate, she's a journalist, and she said, never in my life did I imagine it was a journey for two, right? So Varsha, to your point, I think people usually think about mentoring as one way. And so this whole idea of people knowing that it's an exchange is very good. So Lorraine, thank you, my namesake. Thank you for sharing, for sharing that input. We also have very similar input from Susan, where Susan says, mentors need to know that they have a responsibility to be coachable, right? So mentors have to be open, you know, to being coachable as well. So again, very, very important way. It's not a one-way, it's not a one-way street. So we're going to take a question from Aziti Mungwa, and this is for Sister Namondo. So maybe Sister Nams, you could just share a little bit, you know, how you made the transition from IT to healthcare, and what was that like? What were some of the challenges?
Okay, so as I stated earlier, IBM gave me the option to move to another department, you know, when they had a downsizing, that option or the option to take money for education. So I chose to take money for education and went to, they had some separate building where you go, you try to rewrite your resume and you try to send it out to different companies. And my husband was aware that I was looking for something in healthcare, but I couldn't quite put the finger on it. I knew that I didn't want to go to a 4-year medical school, but I wanted to do something where I would still make an impact in healthcare, you know, in clinical medicine. And that's how his co-worker came into place. His co-worker, the Chinese engineer, had a wife who had done medicine in China, came over here. Yes, and just couldn't get into with the, I think they have, it's the ECFMG exam, right? So she found out about this program, which is a master's program in a medical school. She did that, and that's how she got her fix for, she definitely got her fix for clinical medicine, because we are in clinic every single day. So I was at this, you know, building where I'm there trying to do my resume and look at other options, and my husband called me. He said, this is what I found out. It's a master's program at Emory Medical School. It's such and such and such. Can you go and look it up? I pulled it up. I looked at the prerequisites. I had every single thing except biochemistry. I left from that building. It was 1 p.m. I pulled up KSU. KSU is a university right around the street from us. So I pulled up KSU to see if they were still open and registering students. I drove to the KSU campus. I went down to the registration building and stood in line to register for biochemistry. I kid you not. And yes, for actually organic chemistry and biochemistry. And it so happened that one of the registrars that I spoke with was a Nigerian lady, you know, because I think it was either that that was the last day to register or was just above the deadline. So I had to go into her office to speak with her. And I went in there and my sister, I say, yes, my sister, you have to help me. I'm telling you, the things that happened in a period of 4 hours in this afternoon was just unbelievable. I didn't even have my transcript with me. She said, do you have your transcript? I said, well, I have a copy at home. She said, we need it from the university. I said, can you just use the copy? I'm going to write my university, they'll send you my other transcript. That's how I registered. I'm telling you. So, and I took the organic chemistry, and then I had a similar problem because when you take organic chemistry 1, you have to take 2 to do biochemistry. But I already got admission from the school, and I was not going to sit out a whole year just waiting. So I had to go in to see the dean of chemistry at KSU. And I told him, I said, you have to, they won't let me register for organic 2 and biochemistry 1. You have to lift the bar because I'm not going to waste another year. And he was African-American and he lifted the bar. Not that it makes a difference, but I'm just saying, you know, I honestly, I don't know if that had any influence at all. But I told him, you know, I already have a master's degree in engineering. I'm sure I can do biochemistry and organic 2 together. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So that's how I made the switch. And I haven't looked back ever since. I've been doing this 15 years. I totally love it. I like being in clinic. And speaking of which, I was going to mention, you know, about, you know, like rising in the level of a company. One of the things that they told us when we were in school is there's only so much that you're going to rise as an anesthetist beyond being a chief anesthetist. So you have to be very careful and understand that if you're thinking you're trying to look for some big managerial position in a couple of years, that might not happen. So for me, my niche has been, you know, really focusing on mentoring these students. And I also learn from them. You know, there's so many little tricks that we do, and so many little designs that I'm actually trying to patent that I've come up with to, you know, to help things in the process, to make clinical life easier as we take care of the patients. And I hope that that is something that I can focus on in the long run and get a patent out for some kind of new equipment.
Wow, that's pretty cool. You know, I mean, I love the decisiveness, right? And just taking action, right? I think, again, it ties into, again, a common thread, right? Where, you know, you made the decision, you want to do that. And a lot of people do this, right? They have ideas, like we said, you know, people have a vision, they have an idea, but to execute and just do it. So I love the fact that you said, I want to switch, I want to do this, I'm going to take biochemistry. You went, stood in line, you did it right away. So just the decisiveness and the action, I think it ties into what Varsha said earlier about just get things done. I also love what you said about the fact that, you know, when people look at titles and hierarchy, I've always said leadership is personal, right? You have to be a personal leader. I think Nagella talked about even in the home as a mom. So I think sometimes we confuse titles with leadership. And we all know there's people who have big titles and they're terrible leaders, right? You know, they may not be bad leaders, but they're not good leaders either. So leadership is something that is personal. It can be at any level. There's personal leadership. You know, I think Varsha said, you know, show up as a leader wherever you are. So I hope that's a really important takeaway. I did want us to talk about, I know both Dr. B and Varsha talked about their immigrant experience. So I would love for us to talk about that as women of color, being immigrants here, and you know, sort of really looking at our communities, encouraging our communities to think differently about mentorship. But we had a really great question from Maureen for Dr. Nagella, which you can just piggyback on what you had said already, which is you shared your experience in academia and sort of coming from Case Western. Now at DuPont, it's still a very male-dominated field, right? I work in manufacturing, as a very traditional, very Midwestern, old white men. So how does, Maureen's question is, you know, how do you get, you know, the best of a mentoring relationship when you're in such a male-dominated environment like DuPont, right? You know, it's chemical manufacturing industry. So how does that, what insights can you share from that?
So I think the first trick, all those tricks I am learning as I'm going ahead, the best mentees I have are men. So that's my first segue in a male-dominated area, because again, as I say, I'm learning as much from these mentorship relationships as I am giving back. So most of my mentees are men across the board, you know, and they have shown me, you know, the way to a man's world, and that's exactly what I have never sat in a board meeting or in a panel with another woman. It's lonely. And we've talked about this leadership loneliness as we go up. It's always the case, but I tend to serve like men nowadays, but as Manams and even Dr. Hilda and Varsha said, you have to lead everywhere. I used to be a shy nerd. I have learned to speak up all the time. And I have had situations where, you know, I've had people with all the microaggressions during panel meetings, they say, oh, we didn't think you could do that. And I'm like, the answer I always give back is, I wonder why. And whenever you say that, you know, the first few times they give you that, then the next few times it's okay, you're one of them. But I would say being in a male-dominated place has really made me grow as a female leader. It's gotten to a point where, yes, having them as allies all the time is great. I have been in buildings in DuPont. I mean, DuPont is a century-old company. In buildings where they have one bathroom for women in a 4-floor building and 4 bathrooms for men. And I go into their office and complain about that. And they tell me, oh, because of engineering issues. One guy actually said, oh, because of engineering issues, we cannot really plumb another female bathroom. I said, this is an engineering company. Do you want me to lead that project? So I always put the challenge on them. And in one case, one of the daughters of actually my boss, who is a man, came in for Take a Child to Work Day. And of course, she experienced in this building that there were 5 boys and 5 girls. And the girls had to line up in this one bathroom and the boys were taken onto all the floors. And so this child, my boss's daughter, asked the question, why do we have to line up to go to the bathroom? Why do they have more male bathrooms? And the father said, well, because of the engineering issues and just because DuPont was a male-dominated company. Well, he got sanctioned for saying that.
Oh, wow.
So it just tells you that our girls, even at young ages, can fit in. They can belong. It's something that we need to all learn how to do. We need to all learn how to speak out. And it all comes from that affirmation. And I call that affirmation from other women leaders. Once you take that step and you affirm other women, you give them that voice to go into a male-dominated room and lead.
Yeah.
Maureen, I hope I answered your question.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, that's fantastic, Nagella. And it ties in with the, you know, the theme for this year for the International Day of the Girl is my voice, right? That's why voice is so important. So I love the fact that you verbally ask people back. I wonder why, because a lot of women would not, or sort of laugh it off, right? So I love the fact that it's using your voice. I love the fact that you talk about affirming young girls, because you're absolutely right. You know, young girls today, I would say even my nieces, they speak up, but as they grow older, a lot of times we now start telling them, hey, you know, we moderate them rather than amplifying, helping them amplifying their voice, right? And help them to, and encourage them to speak up. So, you know, I love the fact that, you know, these things exist, right? You know, and the example I always use is, you know, when you go to a company, look at the nursing room, right? Like where they have, where women can pump, it always tells you a lot, right? You know, it's always hidden somewhere. I will tell you, you know, like women have to almost hide and then they go there in this tight little room to pump, right? For their babies, right? It doesn't matter what title you have. So you're absolutely right. A lot of time we have to speak up more. We don't have to be intimidated. This phenomenon of leadership loneliness is huge. You know, I think we have to talk about that, you know, separately, because there's a lot of it, you know, where you're the only woman in the room or the only minority in the room. And again, people have to be visible. People have to be in visible spaces to be seen. So fantastic, you know. So really great, really great comments, you know. Maureen said, yes, you answered her question. She gave you a thumbs up, you know, walking in as a leader. So everyone is thanking you guys all for sharing. So fantastic. So now I did want to talk a little bit more, as I said, about just the experience as immigrants. And, you know, already, you know, Nagella, even from your discussion and Sister Nams, you know, covered it a little bit, but maybe to start with you, Dr. B, you had mentioned the fact that, you know, you sort of came in, you know, and now in your current roles as an immigrant and also a woman of color, why is it really important for our community? What are some of the lessons you've learned today that as you look back on our immigrant communities, we have to encourage people to move away from this idea that you only look for a mentor if you're damaged in some way or it's a development thing, versus really being proactive towards looking for a productive relationship. So maybe Dr. will talk about that. And then of course, Varsha, also I'd love to hear from you on it as well.
So I just want to say, being an immigrant, all of us know it's difficult. It's difficult to fit in, right? So the experience that I shared with you guys, my story when I just got here, that experience helped me grow. That experience helped me want to be that mentor that I wasn't, right? Or the other people that showed me that disappointment, I didn't want to be like that. I want to be this other person. I want to be an inspiration to other young people. So when I finished my fellowship at the university, I stayed on as faculty. Colorado, for those of you who know, it's a very conservative state. There are a lot of white people, right? The minority, I mean, Africans in particular, you can count them. So when I became faculty at the school, of course, I was the only Black person on faculty. Not only Black, but a Black woman. So at the School of Pharmacy, we pride ourselves. We pride ourselves for being the most diverse college on campus. We have the medical school, the PA school, nursing school, Colorado School of Public Health in our medical campus. The School of Pharmacy is the most diverse school on campus, and they get lots of grants from the NIH. But guess what they count as the diversity? The Asian students that come in from California. So in a class of 140, we'll probably have about 30% being Asians who have moved into Colorado from California to pursue pharmacy. And yes, it's diversity, but we don't see a lot of us. So every year I see 1 or 2 or 3 Black students come through, and naturally they will be drawn towards you, right? You are that face. You are that face that they recognize. You are that face that they look up to. So I want to say, I've been teaching for the last 15 years at the School of Pharmacy. And every year, if I see 3 or 4 Black people in my class, I get so excited. I get so excited. The best part is during graduation. You see during graduation, you see the Nigerians, the Cameroonians, the Ghanaians, they show up with a colorful regalia, right? And I'm sitting on stage and I look around me, I'm like the only Black person on stage, but it brings me joy. And sometimes the families will come up to you, they'll be like, congratulations. They're thinking, yeah, you're one of the graduates, which I always pass for. And I say, oh, thank you. But the students be like, no, mom, she's my professor. But you know, the joy that you see on the families' faces, the joys that you see when you're representing this male-dominated, in the past, it used to be male-dominated profession, but now we're seeing more women coming through, we'll see more diversity coming through, we'll see more people we're seeing people that look like us in the field. And a lot of times when I'm in the community, even when I'm working in the pharmacy, I work with white male, right? I used to have an intern who was a very tall white boy, and we'll be in the pharmacy, the 2 of us, and people will walk up to the window and they're like, oh, I have a question for the pharmacist. Guess who they're looking? They're looking at the tall white male, right? And he was awesome. Every time when that happens, I'll just walk away and his response will be, wow, that's a good question. Let me get my pharmacist. And yes, people's faces would drop. But again, it's been a challenge, especially being an immigrant. Every time I start my class with a brand new cohort of students, the first thing I say is, I give out extra credits. I'm sure you're wondering where this accent is from, but I'm from Cameroon. And if anybody can tell me where Cameroon is on the map, you get extra credit. And before they leave that class that day, everybody is Googling where Cameroon is and they want extra credit. But again, those are the challenges that we face, but it's just fulfilling when you are that face, when you are that voice that people look up to. And that's what I share with all the people I mentor, all the people I come across. And every year I keep saying, I want a different challenge. Why am I still doing this? But my students come back to me, they're like, Dr. B, you need to stay there. We need to see you there. It makes us happy when we do. So,
yeah. That's fantastic. You know, I mean, I love the fact that, again, this common theme of being a voice, but also you said being an inspiration, right? You know, so it's very important to be inspired. And I think it was Suzanne who said on the flip side, people should be open to that as well, right? So I think you sharing your story, hopefully it inspires people in our community to know that even if you're the only Black person in a situation, for however long it is, or even if sometimes you get disrespected, like the example with your intern, that's a common experience, right? I remember when I was a professor, when I was teaching, and in the lab, and I would have a teaching assistant who's white, and I would give instructions, and then people would just do something else. And I go, well, why did you do this? And they would say, Lindsay, right? They would point to the teaching assistant. I said, well, she said I could do it, right? You know, so whatever instructions you gave, you know, the other person, their instructions were better, right? No matter what. So it's very important for people to see the stories of persistence and really finding meaning in your work. And like you said, being you know, being an inspiration, even when sometimes there's diversity, but not representation. So to your point, people can say, well, diverse, right? And they have, you know, all kinds of people, but is it really truly representative? It's not. So thank you for sharing that. You know, I think it, you know, again, it kind of shows us the importance of these lived experiences. And as we transition to you know, to Varsha, I also do want to mention that Suzanne mentioned something very important that both you and Dr. Nagella cited, which is the importance of how you actually say it, right? So Suzanne said, you know, she loves the fact that you are not petty when people asked about the bathroom at DuPont, but you are just very tactful and very fact-based, because sometimes we get, I don't want to say emotional, but you're just so frustrated that you can say something and then inadvertently it alienates people. So sometimes, you know, it's very helpful, even when you're in these situations, you know, if someone comes up to your intern and they think they're the pharmacist rather than you, how you handle it, you know, is also very, very important. So Varsha, could you share with us a little bit more about your experience as, you know, as an immigrant and also a woman of color?
Yeah, sure. And I do also want to touch on a couple of very important points that everyone in this phenomenal panel made. And I also love, Lorraine, your participants are so engaging. So we don't want to not address some very important points. Yeah. So I want to just talk about women of color and immigrant, but before that, I want to address a couple of things. One is, we talked briefly about men being our allies, right? I want everybody to understand that it is extremely important. Whether we agree, we like, we don't like, it doesn't matter, right? We need to do this. This is like, you know, sometimes we don't like to take the meds because they're very, you know, they're not good case, but we got to do it because we want to get better, right? So very bad analogy, but it makes the point, right? Think about it. And just really, this is something I'm very passionate about, that we're constantly fighting about gender inequality, right? If on the top and the middle, everywhere we don't have enough women, and we're constantly have a lot of men there, how are we going to address inequality? We have to get more women there. And the only way to get there is by their support. So let's just, you know, let's find people and work with them and learn them. And you know, Dr. Nagella, you said something really important, that you have so many men mentees and you see men's work through them. Very creative, right? So that's really, so I just want to make sure that this is important and we should really think about it. Second thing, as an immigrant and as a woman of color, Asian, right? I personally feel that don't try to fit in. Don't, because you're not going to be able to fit in. Stand out, stand up, right? You can't fit in. Nobody's going to notice, right? And I'll tell you one very small incident that I was working for Goldman Sachs, big company, very few women on the top at the time. On a global call, I was told that don't take things personally. And I'm sure everyone has heard that, right? In our lives, don't take things personally. And I'm like, really? I spent 12 hours of my time on this project since the last 2 months. Don't you tell me, don't take it personally. This is personal, right? So if you try to fit in, that's what they're going to tell you. Don't take it personally, right? I'm like, no, this is important to me. This is as personal as it can get. I'm giving my life to this, right? So again, my point is, ladies, and then I'll make the third point, that as an immigrant, as a woman of color, we already take that very first step that we're ready for a change. Why are we all here? We know we can handle change, right? So let's not be afraid about that. We're great. We already did the first step, that we know how to handle change. Now let's take the bar a little bit higher. That now that I know I can handle change, I can manage and I can shine through the change, I'm going to put my mind to it and I'm going to rise, right? Think about where you want to rise. Nothing is impossible. As I said, if you're going to be true to yourself, you already made that first step. We are here as a change. When I left my job as a professor of chemistry in India, just because my husband was traveling to New York and he has to now spend time in New York and be in US, I knew that I'm a very career-minded woman. I'm now leaving my career and I'm coming here. Who gets to do that, right? It takes a lot of courage. So I really feel that just know that we have a lot of power. And the last thing, I don't know how many of the participants are moms. Think about what can mother not do for their child. Put them to test. Anything, right? For her child, you'll do anything. So, and we say this a lot at Wings for Growth, that think about your strengths. Don't think about areas for development. Your mentor is going to try to tell you, oh, you should work on this, you should work on that. If we keep on reminding ourselves, what are our strengths? I knew my strength is I'm a teacher. My father reminded me, but I forgot when I was on Wall Street, right? That's my strength. And I was constantly being told on a performance review, fix this, do this, improve this, take this class. And I'm going after something that I really never thought was my strength, right? So definitely think about this. And Lorraine, last point I want to make, you mentioned a point that, what kind of mentors you should have, or what are the mentors? And we say this at Wings for Growth. I wouldn't say this is very formally, but very casually, I always mention this, that mentors are your career parents, right? Now get this, mentors are your career parents, right? Now, why would I say this? When you're a student, you're in a classroom, you're learning from teachers, right? Now you left the classroom, do you stop learning? No, we still need to continue to learn, right? So we do need mentors so that we can learn. Now, if we don't have mentors, a lot of these participants, I love this audience, I really want to hit this point home, that if you don't have mentors, you have choices to make, right? I've learned everything I needed to learn in the classroom, I'm in the workforce. So you're learning either by failing, which is great. Everyone should learn through failures, and that's been said here on the panel. But then you have second choice. You can make your choices, right? The second choice is you learn through the failures, but why make those mistakes if somebody can stop you from making those wrong turns? Why waste time? Yeah. Somebody can guide you. Focus on what you can do better, right? So if there's one thing I can tell everybody who does not have a mentor today, look for mentors. Okay, whatever definition you want to have for yourself, for your parent, teacher, whatever feels good for you, right? Go find a mentor and find a mentor who's willing to learn from you, right? If they're not, then they're not mentors. And I would say that if you're not in the mentoring or leadership development program, create a program for yourself. Doesn't matter. You don't have to go anywhere. So, Lorraine, I'll stop my speech there.
Well, like you said, show up and lead. But I love something you said. I actually put it on the chat, right? Where it says, where you said, don't try to fit in, right? Stand up and stand out, right? Which means, again, leverage your strengths. Think about what is unique about you, and sort of, build on that, right? So you're absolutely right. I think as immigrants, a lot of times we get lost, right? Trying to fit in and sort of trying to get along with people, and then you lose what you bring to the table. I always say people want to know what is different about you, right? Because they already know if you walk in with a degree, they know what that degree is. Or you walk in with work experience, they know that. What they're looking for, okay, what else? What is unique about this person? And so I love, Hilda's idea about she makes people get to learn about Cameroon and her accent, right? So that's something different, right? People know, okay, good, there's a little bit of a twist here. So a lot of really,
and you know what, I'm sorry to interrupt, I've been told many times, oh, you have accent, right? I mean, and I'm like, okay, don't worry, I'll spell it out for you. I know how to spell, right? Go for it. Don't let them run over you, right? I'll spell it out. And then honestly, I didn't want to be told that, so I would learn, and I still have accent, doesn't matter. Finally, people start to see beyond that, right? They know that don't mess with this woman, she'll teach you, right? And once they know that, then they're not correct you for your accent or your, I'm just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And most importantly, Varsha, then they stop talking about it, right? Because once you've answered it a few times, then people know I'm not going to ask Varsha about her accent anymore, because guess what, right? It's not, so I love that. I also do want to say we have a couple of questions to take, but what you said about allyship is really important, right? And I think this is like a month of allyship. So again, that's one we can do a whole seminar on. But to your point about how do we engage men and how do we engage allies, in order to help women advance and empower. And so again, I know you're doing a seminar series on that, but it's very, very important. You're right, the analogy of, bitter medicine or difficult medicine is true. We have to figure out a way to work with men, to have men being comfortable with women being in a room and having a voice, right? Because I always tell people, they're going to open the door and let you in. And then make sure that you don't stay in the room, right? They make you so uncomfortable. So very important to, for men to open the door, but also when a woman gets in there, that she's empowered, other women can come in as well. So allyship is very, very important.
And Lorraine, at Wings, we have more than 52% mentors are men, right? I do want to say that once you know how to find the right, mentor, they want to help. They really want to learn from us how to mentor female mentees, right? So that allyship is important. And a little bit of a commercial, it's a free webinar. Join us. It's on our social media on LinkedIn. It doesn't cost you anything, just cost you an hour, right? Listen, we're going to bring these men who are talking about how do they do this and what do they want to do. And most importantly, they're coming with the women who they helped and they become sponsors for them. It's very important. Continue to spread all the good stories too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So wonderful. Okay. So I think Dr. Nagella said aha moment. Mentors are career parents. So I agree. So Varsha, I'm actually going to have you keep talking because I have a question that I want, I want to start with you. And this question is from Bernadette. It talks about the big question, right? Which is about equal pay for women and compensation, right? So I have to imagine again in finance and Wall Street in particular, and I'm sure, Nagella with you in corporate and Dr. B and Sister Nams, I would like us all to talk about this, but when you think about the issue of, equal pay, the fact that we all know it's the data, women are paid, it's all the way from, 60 to 80% what men are paid for. And even that 80, I think it's a little bit deceiving, right? But particularly when you're an immigrant and a Black woman. So can you give some kind of advice on how we as women, we really navigate this whole space of being paid what you're worth, being compensated what you're worth, right? And I will just add on there, and even if you can leverage mentors and sponsors around this whole discussion of fair and equal compensation. So Varsha, maybe we'll start with you and then I'll kind of go around the panel.
And, I think this is the part, I don't know if any of you guys will like my response, but I'll say it anyway, because, I always believe that I work on things that I can control. And I cannot control what my employers pay me. There's one thing I can control. And I have always done that I know my worth. Okay. And there are so many tools today outside. You know your worth, right? Bring your best to your employer and ask boldly, openly, ask what you want and what you deserve. Okay? And if they don't give it to you, walk away. Okay? Now, I was lucky, fortunate enough to do that because my husband was working. You know, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I really just literally walked away from a job who did not, but they didn't pay me what I was worth. So to me, know your worth, bring something very substantial to the table for them, that they know your value. Because if you can't prove your value, you can't ask for what you want, right? So that sounds like, okay, yeah, go ahead and do something else, right? So first make sure that bring your value and show it. So I can't stress enough that interviewing skills is extremely important, because in those interviews, if they know that, my God, she's great, then the salary criteria is secondary in a real job. It is still, I don't deny this. Like I said, it's not a problem I have tackled. I think still happens. I don't know that I got what I wanted every year, but I don't know how everybody else got. My men of my peers who are male peers, I don't know what they got, but I don't care. I don't care really. I know what I'm worth. They're giving me what I want. I'm happy. So to me, I don't know if that's the answer everybody wants to hear.
No, but directionally, it ties in again to what you said about know your power, know who you are. And actually, this idea of knowing your worth, that's what executive coaches will tell you, right? They will say, do your homework, right? So first of all, know what is competitive, right? And so you have a sense of where you are. And then now, figure out a way to be able to show that, right? And to your point, you cannot control what your employer does. I do think there needs to be structural and institutional, the way people look at this, but, the key point is, again, to know what you're worth, right? And be able to show that. So really great perspective. Dr. Nagella, I'm going to come to you next on this question, because I have to imagine, again, also, it's a big issue, right? For women.
So I think in this case, the concept of allies really help, just to have male allies that you, in addition to what Varsha said, stand out. You have to stand out to be able to speak up. So, but one other thing that I think works for us in DuPont is that we have fought for DuPont fellows. We actually call them laureates now, who are women. And more importantly, the leaders of HR, we try to make sure that we have female representation at the leadership level for HR, and they are our greatest advocates. So the women's employee, the ERGs, the employee resource groups, are very keen on fighting for equal pay, and even more. Yeah. At some point, it just has to be based on what you offer, not really about gender. So that's the contribution. I think DuPont has gone one step ahead in that, really, because they knew that it was such a male-dominated company that they're going above and beyond now to be able to get, what we call DuPont fellows, who are female laureates, as well as leadership in HR. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Let's fight for that in every place we work. Let's try for leadership positions in human resources, because that's the game changer.
Yeah, I love that, Nagella. And I think you actually just picked up on my thread of, I believe there has to be the institutional piece, which is what DuPont is doing, right? Where structurally they're looking at it, and it's HR actually doing their piece. And the employee resource groups that you mentioned are driving it, because it's actually employees who are pushing it. Right? So again, advocacy. I'm always a big fan of the word advocacy. You have to stand up, speak out, like Varsha said, look for allies, look for what are the avenues where people can make their voices heard, right? And for an ERG to say, we're going to take this on as an issue versus something else, and push it and push it and push it until we're seeing change. So that's it. And hopefully more companies follow that example, right? And I think
we just really need to speak up in all of these town halls. We cannot sit down and listen anymore. We just need to speak up and have our voices heard, because those questions that usually come up from the bottom of the pit of your stomach,
Yes.
it's usually what every other woman in that room is thinking of, but just not saying it. So the more we all say it, the better for us. I mean, and that's how change occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And I want to read, there's a beautiful comment from Paulette who's one of our mentees. She says, I know my worth and I will not let society pull me down. So very, very important. So thanks, Paulette. Yeah, I felt that as well. So so we're going to ask Sister Nams, Mrs. Lima, maybe just share your insights on this whole idea. Obviously you've had career changes in both male-dominated fields, STEM tends to be, and this whole idea of compensation and equal pay for women. So what are your thoughts about how do you negotiate this in a service environment like you're in?
Well, when I got out of school, I've actually been working at the same hospital for the past 15 years, but I have been through 3 managements. And my current management, I am so proud to say, is woman-owned. So the boss of my anesthesia company is a woman. My chief anesthetist is a woman. So I just feel so lucky because I love them. They have been really good.
It's all right. I think we're all getting, it's a special experience to to see women who are successful and then have that experience of working with them, right? And, sort of having
absolutely
experience. Yeah.
They touch your heart. Yeah.
Yes. But, I've listened in, sometimes you sit with some of the guys and they speak about, the woman who is the boss. And if you only had to listen to the guys, you would actually think that some of these women are, that is not a good person because of the kinds of things that they would say about women. And I actually heard one person say once that, she has bigger balls than me. Yes, just because this woman can stand her ground, she knows what she wants, and she goes and she gets it, and I applaud her for that, because it paves a very good way for us women folk in the company. We feel protected, we feel listened to, we feel like we matter. So I have been really, really lucky in that sense.
Well, thank God for that, Sister Nams, and I love the fact that you're sharing this piece about sometimes the negative narrative about women, because I think sometimes what women feel is they think it's personal. I think, Varsha talked about the fact that it's personal, but a lot of times when women are criticized, they think, it's something that I'm doing, or it's personal. And I think we now know, when we even look at a lot of women in the public arena, what people criticize them for. It's never for their competence, right? Nobody ever criticizes them for what they know or what they can accomplish or for showing up and getting stuff done. They're often criticized for all kinds of other crazy stuff or using the kind of language, that you mentioned. So I think it's wonderful that you're in an environment where you feel empowered, and hopefully it encourages other women, because sometimes we're suspicious of women, right? Sometimes we don't want to work with women. So I think, it's wonderful that we have women in leadership roles who protect and advance women. So we're going to close out with you, Dr. B, just in terms of this whole compensation and equal pay discussion, right? I know, kind of you have one leg in academia and one leg in corporate, almost. So maybe just share with us some insights about how you're compensated for your work.
So we all know the saying, it's totally who you know in the business, right? It's hard, like Varsha said, there are some things you cannot change, but the ones that you can change, I can name a few of them. I always tell my students, do something that will make you stand out. We've talked about knowing your worth, right? How do you figure that out? When I went to school, before I went to school, the pharmacy program was a bachelor's degree program. Everybody had a bachelor's degree in pharmacy. When I went to school, I was the first batch of the All PharmD program. At that time, graduating with a PharmD totally put you ahead of everybody else, right? But right now, all the programs are PharmDs. Everybody is graduating with a PharmD. So what are you gonna do that's gonna put you ahead of the bunch? What certification are you gonna attain? What extra training are you gonna get? There are tons of opportunities out there. We need to step out of the box. A lot of people come out with a lot of student loans when we go through these programs. You all know that. We have families that we need to take care of. We wanna just get in there and start working and start paying off these loans. But I still encourage everyone, do something extra that will make you stand out. So when you're at that negotiating table, right, you have something to show. You have an extra experience to share. You have extra opportunities that you've pursued. If it's getting another master's degree or getting a certificate, getting board certified, that will put you ahead of the bunch. And as you know, it's a hit or miss. There are opportunities out there. We just need to find them. There are some companies that actually have a union, and I happen to work for one. So I've been lucky, like you, Sister Nams. I've been lucky to work for Kaiser, which is unionized. So we actually have a union representation that's fighting for equal pay across the board for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're male or female. It matters your seniority, it matters how long you've been with the company, and everybody gets a raise across the board. In my academic life, I am not tenured, I am not full-time, so I haven't had to deal with that part of the negotiations. So I'm a senior instructor, and I'm just happy every year if I get a 1 or 2% raise. So, but again, just encouraging everyone, do something that will make you stand out, and that will make the negotiations better.
Yeah, I love that, right? We have this common theme, you know, I think, you know, like Varsha had said, stand up and stand out. So what is it beyond the paper or beyond your resume, right? What is it that makes you different? So I love that. I also like, Dr. B, the fact that you talked about unions, right? So I love advocacy. You know, in my, at Ingredient, I was actually co-founder of not just one, but 2 employee resource groups, right? Both the African American and the women's. Now we have a gajillion, we have one for gays, we have early career. But when we started it on the D&I Council, we didn't have any, you know, and at that time, a lot of women went, well, we don't have any issues, you know, why are you, you know, or there were African Americans who said, oh, we're good, you know, but you can really drive your agenda through a group, right? When you have representation, you know, unions, ERGs, whatever these groups are, you know, ally yourself to them, right? You know, you may not 100% agree, right? Everybody comes in with something different, but the power of more than one, a union or a group of people articulating your concerns is very, very powerful. So find a way to always leverage them. And I think, Dr. B, at the beginning, you talked about connectivity and being in the community. That's some of the value that you get. So, so this is fantastic. We're almost 2 hours in, believe it or not. Our conversation is so much. So we'll begin to wrap up, and again, really great engagement on the chat room, you know. So again, Bernadette says women are better managers, period. I happen to agree. I think we're very multifaceted. You know, so again, you know, it's more intuitive, you know. I think, you know, even just being a mom and managing a house always helps a lot. So I think, Varsha, there was a request for you to post the link for Wings for Growth. So I see you've done that. I think we'll also, after this, you know, Lorraine, we'll also make sure we post it on our website and our social media so people can see the offerings that you have for workshops as well. So I think just to wrap up, we'll go around the panel and maybe everyone can just share, you know, one key takeaway message. You know, we've all figured out, you know, your passion, you know, your engagement, and I have been taking notes, as you guys can see, because I'm also learning a lot. But, you know, just to close out, just to close out, if there's one key message, and Dr. B, I'm going to start with you, sort of, one key takeaway that you would have, for our participants.
I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that we've talked about already. Mentorship is great. It's important to find the right mentor. Mentorship is not a one-way street. We have to have investment in both parties. And please, 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 to our young women out there, do not take no for an answer. The sky is the limit. That's my closing remark.
There you go. That's beautiful. Do not take no for an answer, right? And take action like Dr. B did. You get rejected from one school, go apply to 10. You get one bad mentor, go find 10 others, right? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. B. Okay, Sister Nams. So what would be kind of your takeaway message to add to all the fabulous stuff you said already?
Well, my takeaway message is, once you locate that which you want to do in life, that which you're passionate about, find a mentor, and I'm sure everybody else will agree with me, the sky is not your limit. The sky is your stepping stone. Yes.
I like that.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. You can absolutely accomplish whatever you set your mind to. And, if you ever get in a situation where you might even get in a situation where you think you have a good mentor, but it might not be a good fit, no problem. Just look for another one until you get somebody who gives you that drive, that information that you need to get you to your highest level. That's my advice.
Yeah. The sky is not your limit, it's your stepping stone, right? So no limits.
Awesome.
No limits. That's fantastic. So we're also getting some really great commentary from our participants that I'm going to read at the end. But Dr. Nagella, what would be your key takeaway message?
I'm not on mute. So I think for me, I have learned a lot again today. I'm always learning. So the one line I will take out of this is that the strength of a female mentor-mentee relationship enforces the power of female empowerment in any space and the recognition of the male colleagues as equal allies.
Correct. Awesome.
Yeah. Excellent. That's good. Yeah, because women, we have to trust other women, right? And we have to look up to other women. And that gives us leeway to now be able to look up to men and to trust men as well. And I love that, Nagella. Women empowering women is one of our hashtags that we use a lot, right? Women have to empower other women. So I love that. So the strength of that relationship. So that's beautiful. And so Varsha, we're going to close out with you in case, we all have great takeaway messages from everybody. So one final one.
And I think first I want to say that, my God, what an amazing, amazing panel, participants. So I have lots of notes everywhere. So totally appreciate everything. One thing that I want to say, do two things. One is I want to address something that is absolutely urgent and critical. And that is that we are all going through very difficult times, right? It's pandemic, it's political issues, environment, climate change. There is never a bad time to do something good. We got to do it now, right? Every woman has a leader in her. So if you walk away from this conversation today that I have a leader in me, I just have to find it. And then I have to put it to use. Definitely do that. And that's extremely, extremely important. And then I would just say, this has been said, that we are often also labeled that women don't help women. Okay, that's what I hear a lot from men. Okay, and that's a reality. If we run away from reality and pretend it doesn't happen, then we will never address the problem, right? So it's been said. I love how Dr. Nagella said that, look, we find a female mentor and we partner with our male colleagues, right? That allyship. So think about that. Let's not have men tell us that we don't help each other. This is not even a starting point for any growth, right? So definitely. And then last thing I would say, again, I'll just say the same thing, that you have to be true to yourself, because everyone else is taken, right? So it's just, you just have to be true to yourself. So if we can combine these three things, I think we can do a lot of good things together in the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? I think you had opened up with the be true to yourself, authenticity. That's beautiful. I love this whole idea about, you know, the negative connotation. I remember we had a sticker once on catfight, right? Because remember this term catfight, right? Where once there's two women on the same committee or the same group, people stand around waiting for you guys to start fighting, right? Every little disagreement, people go, oh, it's a catfight, they can't get along. So I love the fact that we're really being proactive and deliberate in saying, no, it's not true. Women actually, we do get along, we support each other, we empower each other, you know, and then we can partner with men, you know.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
some really
So,
great
Lorraine, if I can ask all of us today, we always have to have an action, right, from every conversation. Otherwise, the Saturday afternoon for 2 hours chat, if we don't have action, then it's not going to be impactful. So I'm going to request to all of us today that finds one person you can help. Woman, find one person. Doesn't matter how junior, how senior, where you are, doesn't matter. Just find one person you can help and let this group know that you did it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, and we're going to follow up with everybody. I love that, you know. Varsha, I love what you also said about every woman has a leader in them. Did everyone know that? I don't think a lot of people think about that, right? So every woman has a leader in you. So so take action. You're a leader. You can impact somebody. There's never a bad time to do good, right? That was the other quote. So we all deal with stuff, but you know, it's always a good time to do something good. So so that's fantastic, you know. So so we have quite a few comments in the chat that I wanted to close out with, and I'm actually going to start with Lambert, who I need to say
I need a mentor.
Yeah, and you know, Lambert is actually one where he's always said this. You know, he has a lot of Lambert, if you're okay for me to share, but you have a lot of very positive female influence in your life. Your mom, your sisters. And you've really been, you know, he had us on the show to talk about the Kuwa Foundation. So truly someone who wants to be an ally, who's very proactive. And so Lambert, we have to find a mentor for you, even though you're a man, right? In addition to the great mentors you have in your family, you know, your daughters, you know. So I love to see this. I love to see your engagement. So thank you, really, really fantastic, you know, inputs. You know, we have really positive input from Auntie Free, you know, one of my mentors, actually all the way from Cameroon. So thank you, Auntie Free. You know, I'm glad this was, you know, a great conversation for you. You know, she said it's been a marvelous webinar. So I do want to share, Auntie Free is also an advocate. She's actually been involved in policy around child trafficking and girls, right? So Varsha, talk about action. People who've actually taken action to empower girls and women. So we're really glad she could join us today and to get this wonderful feedback. So that's great. Everybody else, you know, I think Suzanne talked about the fact that this was very good. Lillian also, you know, has some quotes in there. So thank you, everybody. We even have Auntie Savannah as well. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad the conversation was very productive. So we're gonna make sure we have this available on you know, on our YouTube channel, you know, at some point, so we can go back and look at all the nuggets. But again, I want to start by thanking all of our participants, right? You know, to take some time, like Varsha said, take some time on a Saturday from different countries, right, to get on and to listen. And I know there would have been more. There were actually a couple of events that overlapped with this today. That were equally critical. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your engagement. I'm glad that there was value to this. I'm glad you took away the learnings. We'll make sure to continue sharing those. You know, and I cannot thank my panelists enough, right? As I said, they're all esteemed panelists, they're advocates, they're champions. And I hope that by them sharing their very personal insights, you know, you all see the quality of work they're doing, their dedication. It's all very personal for everybody. all of their settings are very different. You know, that's what excited me about this panel. Everybody comes from such a very different space, very different stages, very different experiences. But as you see, there's a lot of commonalities. It's about you know, being an inspiration, making sure that you're empowering women, making sure that women step up as leaders, all the way from very structured programs to you know, all kinds of different programs, and even looking at institutional, you know, even looking at institutional change as well. So thank you very much to our panel.
Lorraine,
Yes.
hey, Lorraine, can I say something also?
Absolutely.
I want to say that no session ever is phenomenal without a great moderator. I mean,
Right.
honestly, what a great moderator you are. You brought the best in all of us. And I have been saying this to Lorraine over the chats, that what a professionalism and how to bring this entire webinar together to make sure that it will be productive. So let's just all give us a round of applause to her.
Oh, thank you, Varsha. Thank you, everybody. That is very high praise coming from yeah. Thank you, Varsha. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for your openness. You know, we planned this, as Varsha said, we've been working on this for a while. Everybody has been really committed, and as you see, everybody brought their best selves and shared their personal experiences. So I really thank you all. Thank you all for the support of Kuwa, right? You know, we had a vision to find ways to empower women and really talk about leadership. And I'm glad you're all engaged. We're all part of this journey. As you saw, Varsha has shared the information about WINGSForGrowth. I've had a personal experience through the program. And as you all see, being with her today. So the webinars are all free. Make sure, you know, go on there, get information, and let's continue to grow in this space of excellence, right, and mentorship, and hopefully walk away even more empowered, so we can stand up and stand out and have even more worth. So thank you, everybody. And if we could have the panelists stay on for a couple more minutes. I know it's been over 2 hours already, but but thank you, everybody.
Sure.
Yeah. And thank you for the standing ovation to the moderator.
You bring out the best in us.
Oh.
You really do.
Really.
You really do. You know, sometimes we